Hello and welcome to Gospel Powered, and I'm Charlie. And today I thought I would share with you my road from not being saved at all to being saved to presuppositional apologetics. My road is a little different, but I wanted to give you a background of why I land on presuppositional apologetics. And so when I was an unbeliever, I was asking questions. I went to church, my dad was a pastor, and I asked questions and questions and questions. And I remember a time when I was asking these questions and the men of the church could not answer them in a way that was satisfying intellectually. I could not get the answers that I wanted. And so eventually just decided that the Bible could not answer my questions. Now, I was probably elementary, junior high when this thing was going on, but I was asking questions, and I could not get satisfying answers. And so I just decided the Bible doesn't have them and began my road to rejecting the Bible and leaving the church. And so long story in between there and when I was 30 years old, I was in a car accident. I was put on my back. I moved back in with my parents so that they could help take care of me. And their rule was, if you live with us, you go to church with us. And so I went to church with them. And in going to church with them, I heard the gospel again. And in hearing the gospel, I believed the gospel. I believed that I needed this Jesus. I needed forgiveness of sins. I needed his righteousness, and I needed his power from the resurrection to be able to live differently than I was actually living in the world. And so I embraced the gospel fully, but I still had questions. And as a believer, I started asking these questions, and I started finding actually satisfying answers in the Bible that led to a theological outwork, that led to a way in which I was wanting to do apologetics. The problem was, in the church that I was in, we were sovereign grace, doctrines of grace sort of church, where we believed that it was God who saves the man by granting belief and repentance. 2 Timothy 2:22-25 in there says that very thing, and we believed that. And so this doctrines of grace and the apologetics that I was studying was different. The advice that I was given was study Dr. Norman Geisler for your apologetic, but don't go to him for your theology. And so that was somewhat confusing for me. I was wondering why is it that I have to go to him for an apologetic and I can't listen to him about his theology? And the reason that I came up with in my studies of it myself was he was Armenian in his theology. He believed that man must act before God can save, that God puts salvation together and then makes an offer, and whoever so will may come, and those that come he saves, and those that don't he does not. But that did not align with the doctrines of grace that I was learning in our church. And so I was confused about how this doctrine of man's supremacy in salvation, clinging to what Christ had done, was able to then give an apologetic that the doctrines of grace, which is God reaching into sinful man and rescuing him, and an apologetic that came out of that. And so I could not reconcile those two things. This doctrines of grace being incompatible with the Armenian theology that I was studying under the tutelage of my pastors, and even starting to go to Bible school and read there. And so I finally went to seminary, and in seminary I was introduced to this book, 5 Views on Apologetics. And in this book on 5 views of apologetics, there were 2 that jumped out at me as I was reading it, and they were written by John Frame, Presuppositional Apologetics, and Reformed Epistemology. And I started looking at those and saying, what is this? But as I read this book, it was difficult. A lot of philosophy, a lot of ideas in there I didn't think were compatible. The gospel wasn't central in the proclamation of this apologetic, and it was very, very difficult to follow. Well, about halfway through the quarter, we switched and started reading Always Ready by Dr. Bonson. And as I read this book, it was like taking a bath. It was like, finally, somebody who's apologetic is in line with the doctrines of grace. And now I had a mentor to read and study, not only my professor in apologetics, but also this Dr. Bonson that I could start to read and follow. My professor, as you know, he wrote his book, Apologetics by the Book, and I thought that was a very helpful book. But it didn't always push me out into how I do this. And so I started reading everything Dr. Bonson wrote. And as I read and as I started reading Van Til, the lights came on, and I was like, now I know how to present the gospel in an apologetic manner to an unbeliever without jumping away from the doctrines of grace. And so it was as if now the theology and the beliefs that I had in the Bible and the kind of apologetic that I was going to engage the world with made an alignment and married themselves together in such a way that it just made sense to me. And all of a sudden, the whole world started opening up. And now philosophy makes sense to me. And now the way the Bible presents the Trinity and all of those things, everything just started making sense with me. And so I became a presuppositional apologist, not because I was taught it necessarily, because I eventually was taught it, but because the other apologetic systems did not align with what I believed I was reading and understanding from the Bible. And so I'm a presuppositional apologist because I'm also one who holds to the doctrines of grace. Hopefully that is helpful, makes sense to you, and you can start to understand me and why we should hold to an apologetic that matches the system we believe comes out of the Bible. Presuppositional apologetics should be held by anyone who holds to the doctrines of grace. Have a great day.